Welcome to Parshas Hashavua. This week's Parshas Tazria, but as we said last week, we are going to do some concepts on the Haggadah Shel Pesach this week and in Mitzvah Hashem next week as well. However, today, I do want to just begin with a short idea from Parshas Tazria, which is connected to Pesach. The bulk of Parshas Tazria starts off with the dinim of tzaras, the laws of leprosy and all the halachas and impurities that went with it, how it had to be done through the kohen, and so on and so forth. Now, the connection to tzaras, to the going out of Mitzrayim, is an obvious one because we know that way back at the burning bush, at the sneh, Moshe Rabbeinu stood and he argued with Hashem and he said that he doesn't want to go to be the leader of the Jewish people because they won't believe him. They're too tired. They won't be able to come to terms with the fact that there's going to be a leader that's going to redeem them and so on. And Hashem gave him two signs that he could perform for the Jewish people as a sign that he was the leader. The first one was to throw his stick down and it turn into a snake and then turn back into a stick. The second one, we spoke about this previously. The second one is a similar idea, where Hashem told him to put his hand in his chest, and he took out his hand, and his hand turned to tzaras, it turned to leprosy, just like this week's parsha. But then he told him to put it back, and it turned back into his hand, into a live hand, into a proper hand, a healthy hand. So one of the ideas perhaps behind this is similar to the idea we discussed previously about the snake. The Chazal tell us that there are four things that choshuv kemeis are all considered as if it's dead. One of them is a metzora, a leper. Someone who has tzaras, is lacking life. It's analogous for whatever reason to the idea of misa, to the idea of death. Death means there's no highest. There can be death, literally speaking, but death can also mean the person has lost all hope, his despair, lost all vibrancy, lost all enthusiasm. So Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Hashem that he doesn't think the Jewish people will believe him because they have lost hope. They are like mace, they are like dead, in other words, spiritually dead. They've despaired, they've given up hope, they're not in the mindset to look for redemption and to hope for redemption. So Hashem tells him, put your hand into the chest, and it turns into tzaras, it turns into leprosy. Yes, there can be sometimes where a person get to that level of being kames. But then he says, put your hand back. And it turned back to living flesh. In other words, Hashem was telling him it's not true. Even if a person has descended to the madrega of Mitzvah, being a leprosy, and we know that leprosy is representative of a very impure plague, a negat, as it's called, and it's a very low madrega and so on and so forth. We don't have it today, but it was in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, at the time of the desert it was there. Even if a person has reached that level, there's always return, there's always hope. Put your hand back, he said, and it will turn back to a vibrant, warm flesh, which is a sign of hope and life. And that's how Moshe Rabbeinu had to go and approach the Jewish people. That's a little word on the parsha, but now what I'd like to do is focus on another paragraph of the Haggadah, as we did last week. The Haggadah tells us, this is towards the end of the Haggadah, meaning before we begin Hallel, before we wash for matzah and so on. After we've spoken about Pesach, matzah, and moreh, the Haggadah says, B'chol Dor Vador, in every generation, chayiv odom lirois es atzmoi. A person is obligated to see himself, ke'ilu hu yotza mi Mitzrayim, as if he has come out of Mitzrayim. What does that mean? It means, of course, that the going out of Mitzrayim is a personal experience. It's something we have to not just remember, but experience. We have to be the ones going out of Mitzrayim. Spiritually, what this means is that we all have our own Mitzrayim, as we've spoken about many times, and we have to continuously go out of Mitzrayim. In the book of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe adds a word, and he says, he quotes this Maimar Chazal, he quotes this Mishnah actually, which is in the Haggadah, B'chol Dor Vador, Chayiv Odom Lirois Es Atzmoi, and he says, not only B'chol Dor Vador, but B'chol Yoim V'Yoim. Every single day, we know that every single day we have a mitzvah to remember the going out of Egypt. And therefore every single day it becomes a personal experience. And we experience it again. Every single day a person has to push his or her own boundaries and to go out of Mitzrayim. However, we obviously know that the Mishnah doesn't say Chol Yom V'Yom. The Mishnah says B'chol Dor Vador because every generation, and of course it is something we should think about every single day, but particularly on Pesach, which is why we have it in the Haggadah, particularly with greater emphasis and with greater strength and with greater personal geula. It has to be done on the Pesach night. Now, of course, the Rambam has the famous Girsa, and the Rambam tells us that the idea, and why we say it now in the Haggadah, is not just because we have to talk about it, but the way we show that we are going out of Mitzrayim. The Rambam says, not b'chol Dor Vador. He doesn't say in every generation, chayav odom, a person is chayav lirois es asmoy, to see himself as if he's going out of Mitzrayim, but he says, b'chol Dor Vador chayav odom leharois es asmoy. Haros means to show, to demonstrate, which is why on Pesach night we don't only talk about it. It's not only a mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, to tell the story, but it's a mitzvah to show. We have to lean, we have to have matzah, we have to have good things on the table. We have to show, we have to demonstrate experientially our exodus from Egypt by going out of Mitzrayim. Now, what's important to understand is the following. That b'chol Dor Vador, it's of course not enough to show that we are going out of Mitzrayim, but we have to understand that the going out of Mitzrayim is our personal responsibility. Before I tell you that, let me just share another quick idea, and that is, everyone goes out of Mitzrayim in their own way. Everyone has the ability to go out of Mitzrayim, and everyone can go out of Mitzrayim. There's a Mishnah at the very beginning of the 10th parak of Pesachim that talks about the Seder, order of the Seder. And it says, Afilu oni b'Yisrael, even a person who's very, very poor, lo yochel ad sheyosev, is not permitted to eat on the Pesach night until he's able to lean and eat matzah and drink the 4 cups of wine. And the Mefarshim explain there's also not just a halachic thing telling that everyone is obligated in the mitzvah, but it's also a spiritual thing. Afilu oni b'Yisrael, even a poor person, meaning a poor person is spiritually poor, a person who's completely bereft of spiritual progress, even such a person can go out of Mitzrayim. Conversely, we say in the Haggadah, Afilu kulanu chachamim, even if you're all wise, we all know the Torah, we also have to go out of Mitzrayim. We also have to tell a story because everyone has a Mitzrayim. It's all relative. Everyone can go a little bit further. Everyone can push themselves. Everyone can go out of their own personal Mitzrayim. But we need to know that going out of Mitzrayim is hard work, and it's something that Hashem allows us to do and gives us the gift of freedom, gives us the ability, but we have to do it. I saw an interesting, beautiful word that in benching, every day in benching, when we wash for bread, in benching, in the second paragraph, we say we thank Hashem for the land of Israel and so on, and we have the following phrase. We say, Al shehinchalta la'avaseinu, we thank Hashem for bequeathing, for giving to our forefathers the inheritance of the land, Eretz Chemda Toiva Rechava. And then we say, and we also thank Hashem for taking us out of Eretz Mitzrayim. So it's interesting. When it comes to giving the land of Eretz Yisrael, we don't thank Hashem for giving us the land. We thank Hashem for giving Shehin Chalta Laviseinu, He bequeathed it to our forefathers. When it comes to Mitzrayim, it says Shahid say Sonu Eretz Mitzrayim. He took us out. Because this is the point that the Haggadah is making. Yetzias Mitzrayim is a personal thing. It's not just that we relive and we even re-experience what happened to our forefathers. We say that Hashem took every one of us out of Mitzrayim. And therefore, every year we have to say that we are going out of Mitzrayim. We are experiencing Geula. When He gave the land of Eretz Yisrael, many other stories that happened in the Tanakh, that happened to our forefathers, and we inherit the gift. We inherit the inspiration. We inherit the possibilities. Like Eretz Yisrael, Hashem gave our forefathers Eretz Yisrael, and we inherited it also after that. So the generation that went out of Mitzrayim afterwards, their children went into Eretz Yisrael, and we inherit the land. It's still ours through inheritance. But when it comes to Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's very unique. When it comes to Yetzias Mitzrayim, it is not about an inheritance from someone else. It is our experience. It is our story. We went out of Mitzrayim, and we have to continue going out of our own Mitzrayim, and that is our personal obligation. Now, we need to understand this a little bit. Why is it such an emphasis when it comes to Yetzias Mitzrayim? Why is it? In other words, we don't have this with other mitzvahs. It's so unique. In other words, on Purim, nowhere does it say in Purim that we have to view ourselves as having been saved from Haman, right? Now, of course, every Yontif we don't just remember, we re-experience. Yes, we know that Jews don't remember history, we experience history. But the story of Purim happened to a particular group of people. We know that it also happened spiritually, and it's got lessons for us, and we take it and we say that the energy of Purim is applicable every year, and we try to tap into what is happening on Purim. But we don't make it as if the story happened to us. When it came to Mitzrayim, we say the story is our story. It's a story that happened to us. Why is it so unique? What do we mean by that? But of course, to understand that, we have to understand the very essence of Yetzias Mitzrayim. There's many Mefarshim explain, the Maharal talks about this, the Netziv Shalom goes into great length about this as well nowadays in a more contemporary sefer, and explained in many, many places. And what I'm going to share with you also is a part of it, the word from the Lubavitcher Rebbe and his Haggadah that he brings down from other Mefarshim and so on and so forth. The concept is like this, that Yetzias Mitzrayim is not about leaving slavery. Yetzias Mitzrayim, yes, of course, we eat bitter herbs, and we know we were in Mitzrayim and we were slaves, and we thank Hashem for taking us out and making us a nation. And some of the time we say the reason why we have to look at ourselves as being free from Mitzrayim, because if Hashem wouldn't have taken us out, we would still be there, we'd still be enslaved. But deeper than that, the Geula from Mitzrayim was a Geula of the Neshama. It was a spiritual Geula mainly. We know that the Maharal talks about this, that gift of freedom. Before Yetzias Mitzrayim, we were fundamentally enslaved, meaning even our neshama was in Golus. Even our neshama was trapped. Our neshama couldn't have full expression. We were trapped in Mitzrayim, spiritually speaking. We weren't able to become Hashem's nation and to really connect to something infinite and beyond ourselves. Geula of Mitzrayim, of course, was also a physical Geula, but mainly was a spiritual Geula. It was a spiritual Geula that we were given freedom. Our neshama received freedom. In fact, the Sfarim bring down that this freedom is eternal, meaning that even though we're back in Golus, and we were back in Golus a number of times, we continued to celebrate Pesach, because every other Golus, every other exile, only the Jewish body went into Golus. Yes, the nations can enslave us, they can persecute us. One thing they cannot do, they cannot remove the freedom of the neshama that was given to us when we left Mitzrayim. As soon as we left Mitzrayim, we became intrinsically, in a soul way, intrinsically and spiritually free. And we remain free. And that's why even under the harsh conditions sometimes of Golus, where the spiritual harsh conditions or physical harsh conditions, we continue to be connected to Hashem. We continue to make the choice to be servants of Hashem because we are intrinsically free. All of our neshamas were in Mitzrayim, and all of our neshamas were redeemed from Mitzrayim. In other words, it is indeed a very personal thing. It's not something that happened to our forefathers, something that happened to our neshama. Our neshama, it actually happened. It's not just we look at ourselves as if we are going out. It happens to our neshama, and therefore something we have to continue to do and continue to experience by continuously going out of our Mitzrayim each day. When we become comfortable with some madrega, with some level, that we then push ourselves to go to the next level. This is very much emphasized in the Haggadah, in the famous story about the rabbis who were telling the story of Mitzrayim in Bnei Brak, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Tarfon, and Rabbi Akiva, and so on. If you look at it, it's a very interesting thing. Those rabbis, those 5 rabbis, they were made up of 3 types of Jews. One was a Kohen, others came from the tribe of Levi, and Rabbi Akiva came from a convert. We know that in Mitzrayim, the tribe of Levi actually were not slaves. They were exempt from slavery. The Gerim, the converts, their forefathers were definitely not in Mitzrayim. And yet, specifically, it was these 5 rabbis celebrating the Geula from Mitzrayim. Because although the tribe of Levi weren't slaves, and although Rabbi Akiva's ancestors weren't physically slaves, but Rabbi Akiva's neshama was, and the tribes of Levi's neshama was, because all neshamas were in Golus and all neshamas were given freedom, and that's why it's such a personal experience, such a personal journey. Finally, I want to just touch on the phrase that says, "B'chol Dor Vador chayev Adam." Person is chayev. Why do we have this expression of chayev? So I saw a beautiful word in the Mojitza Haggadah Isha Yisrael. Chayev normally is a phrase that we are guilty. Chayev, meaning when a person says that I'm chayev, chayev means I'm deficient, I'm not complete. In order to be able to go out of Mitzrayim, Chayev Adam, a person has to know they're Chayev. We are never complete. There's always more to do. There's always more we can do. We always owe more. We have not reached the perfect state yet. Mashiach comes, that's a different story, but until Mashiach comes, we are continuously going out of Mitzrayim, because we are Chayev. B'chol Dor Vador, Chayev Adam. One of the first steps to going out of our own personal Mitzrayim, to going out of our personal comfort zone, is to be truthful with ourselves of what our weaknesses are, where we need to push ourselves. We can be truthful also of what we have accomplished, of the Mitzrayim we have gone out of. But every time Pesach comes, we have to be honest with ourselves. What is it that we can do more? We are Chayev. We are not complete. We're not perfect. We have a lot still to go to be able to accomplish. Therefore, b'chol Dor Vador, Chayev Adam, a person is Chayev. When he's Chayev to look at himself in that way, then he can go, Ki'ilu Yotzav Mitzrayim, he can go out of Mitzrayim. And he says a beautiful thing. We know that every day after davening, in the middle of davening, after Shema in the Vayatzi, we recount the going out of Mitzrayim, and we say, Emes, it is true. We say a few things there. We use the word Emes a number of times there. And that's a whole nother discussion of why that is. But one of the phrases says, we say to Hashem, Emes, it is true. From Mitzrayim you redeemed us from the house of slavery, you took us out, and so on. So the Isha Yisrael translation says, if you want Mitzrayim ge'altonu, if you want to be able to go out of Mitzrayim, you have to preface it with emes. You have to be true, you have to be honest with yourself, that you're not complete, you're still in Mitzrayim. When there's emes, then there's Mitzrayim ge'altonu, mebeis avodim pedisanu. That is just a little bit on that paragraph of B'chol Dor Vador. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.